Well, earlier this evening I met the First Minister and asked him why the proposition had to be so complicated.
Well, I don't think it's complicated at all. The reason it's a draft bill as opposed to a bill is quite simple.
No, I meant the questions.
Well, there is an aspect that we have to make it clear in terms of the referendum. The referendums in this country are consultative, that the final progress lies with the Parliament. So you ask people the question in principle, and then the process is passed on to the Parliaments, in this case Westminster and Scotland, to take out the action dependent on what the people have said.
Right, but you see, if you ask people whether they want the Scottish Parliament to have powers to, I can't remember what the wording is, to negotiate or to take Scotland forward to independence or something like that, it's perfectly possible some people would say, well, yeah, I think it's quite a good idea if the Scottish Parliament had powers to make Scotland independent if it wanted to, but I'm not in favour of independence.
Well, you have to establish the point that...
But you would take that as a mandate,
yes, well, I'm saying quite clearly, and that's what the paper does, that the referendum asks the question both in terms of extending the powers of the Parliament for devolution and extending the powers of the Parliament to enable independence. And then once the people have expressed their view, it's for the parliaments of the UK and Scotland to take forward the people's wishes. It is the point that referendums, all referendums incidentally, in the UK are consultative. They're not mandatory in themselves.
No, I
but the
understand
tradition
that,
has been
for example,
to accept people's wills.
some just talking to people in the street today, and you know, some of them say, look, I don't understand this. I just want, can't they just ask me if I want independence or not? Well,
we have to put the question in this form to illustrate the fact that the referendum's to consult and then the action is taken by the parliaments. But look, this is quite simple, Gordon. If people don't want any change in a two-question referendum, they vote no. If they want further powers for the Parliament in terms of devolution, they vote yes to the first question. If they want further powers to enable independence, they vote yes to the second question. They vote yes. That's what I would do. And if they just want the devolution bit and don't want the independence vote, they vote yes to the first question and no to the second question. We've done this before in Scotland. An exact analogy in 1997. I think we'll manage to do it this time. It's a pretty clear formulation.
But, I mean, what if there was a yes vote? What exactly would that be a mandate for? People would have voted for devolution and for independence.
Well, we spell that out exactly in terms of the paper. We say exactly what actions would happen under any scenario. If people, the reason you have a two-question referendum is that people vote by majority for the Parliament to move forward to independence, to enable independence to be achieved, then that is a mandate for independence, if that's a majority for that question. There's nothing new in this, incidentally. Again, in 1997, we had a two-question referendum where there was a first question about a Parliament and a second question about economic powers for that Parliament.
Right. So, I'm still not quite clear. Let's say there was a majority in favour of one of the two options in your first question and a majority in favour of independence, just putting a hypothetical scenario. What is that a mandate for? Because it seems to be a mandate for two completely different things.
No, the questions are formulated as they are to make this absolutely clear. And reading the document, then, I'm quite certain. And in terms of the ballot paper itself, of course, it spells out exactly what people are voting on. If you vote in favour of the first question, then you're voting to extend the powers of the Parliament for economic powers to enhance devolution. So the Parliament will have economic teeth. If there's a majority in favour of the second question, it's powers to enable independence to be achieved. And exactly in the documentation, it spells out that then the UK Parliament and the Scottish Parliament must set about the actions required if they want to pay attention to the people's will. Now, it is true, of course, that theoretically, a Parliament in the UK could ignore the will of the people of Scotland. I think that's unlikely. I think that the vast majority of politicians have said that even though no referendum is binding in this country, that nonetheless politicians pay attention to the wishes of the people.
Well, what's the timing on this? I mean, you're very keen to give the people of Scotland a chance to vote on this. You don't seem very keen to give the Scottish Parliament a chance to vote on it.
Oh, I'd be delighted to have this bill into the Scottish Parliament tomorrow, but as you're well aware, the Labour, Tory, Liberal parties, the Unionist parties, the coalition against us just now signalled that as soon as we put it into the Parliament, they would kill the bill. Now, my view is...
Why are you so confident that after a general election they might not just do exactly the same thing?
Well, you say confident. I think there is a possibility, let's put it that way, that the attitude they have before election, which seems to be to deny the people of Scotland the opportunity to vote in their own country's future, might change in the aftermath of an election. Now, I had an exact experience of this back in 1992, where the Labour Party went into a general election against the referendum on Scotland's future. After they lost that election, they were suddenly converted to the prospect, and Donald Dewar, late John Smith, indeed Gordon Brown, started to campaign avidly for a freeway referendum on Scotland's future. So it is sometimes that the circumstances after an election are better than perhaps the frenzied atmosphere before a UK election.
Well, of course, cynics would say it's in your interest to promote this referendum for, like, Billy Hole, but never actually to have it, because you know you'd lose it, and then the SNP would be a busted flush.
Well, the first part of your question, I admit to. I'm promoting this referendum like Billy-o, because it was in our manifesto, because it's part of the purpose of the Scottish National Party to achieve independence for our country. We believe that should be done through a referendum and a democratic vote of the Scottish people, asking the people of Scotland their opinion. The second part of that, I'm trying everything I know to have this referendum carried in this Scottish Parliament. If at the end of the day, despite the flexibility, despite putting the devolution question on the ballot paper, trying everything I can possibly think of to bring at least one of the unionist parties on board, if at the end of the day they combine and say, you're not having the referendum, we're not allowing the people of Scotland to have that vote, then I think it would be a significant, perhaps even the dominating issue in the 2011 Scottish election campaign.
What if you ever get this referendum and people vote against independence? What would you do?
Well, I love answering hypothetical questions. What we've tried to do
is... This entire conversation is hypothetical, isn't it?
Well, exactly. We spell out the hypothesis and what happens if the referendum is successful, exactly what would then be set in train if the referendum was successful. I found basically it's best not to hypothesise on failure, to say what you're going to do if you lose an election or lose a referendum, but clearly
but you've said you've said that a referendum would be a once-in-a-generation affair. I just wonder what the point of the Scottish National Party would be if you had a referendum and people voted against independence.
Well, the SNP's goal and mission will be to work towards an independent Scotland and to achieve an independent Scotland. That is the SNP's raison d'etre. That is our goal. I've also said that, in my view, in my estimation, a referendum is a once-in-a-generation thing. Why do I say that? Because we had a referendum way back in 1979, which had a majority, but not a big enough majority. A generation later, a political generation later, in 1997, we had an overwhelming majority to set up the parliament we have now. I believe you have referendum once in a generation. I just really would like to get this referendum, and I would like to win it for Scotland.